What if I told you the war between the land and the sea season 1 finale didn't end with peace? It ended with genocide. Warning, spoilers ahead. Episode 5 doesn't ask who won the war. It asks what humanity was willing to do to survive. Because in this finale, the Sea Devils don't lose because they're weaker. They lose because they trusted us. And by the time the truth about Severance is revealed, it's already too late. Emotional and haunting. This wasn't a story about humans versus monsters. It was a story about what monsters humans become when they're afraid. Episode 5 of The War Between the Land and the Sea strips away the politics, the diplomacy, and the hope, and leaves us with a devastating truth. The war didn't end because peace was achieved. It ended because one side was wiped out. Let's break down how it happened and why it changes everything. Fast, punchy, algorithm-friendly. The Sea Devils weren't defeated. They were poisoned. In Episode 5 of The War Between the Land and the Sea, humanity doesn't win the war. It commits an atrocity, hides behind diplomacy, and calls it survival. From Severance to Accord, to that final chilling scene on the beach, this ending is way darker than it first appears. Here's everything you missed. Lore-focused, Doctor Who fans. The Doctor never showed up. And Episode 5 finally tells us why. The war between the land and the sea ends not with salvation, but with judgment. As humanity crosses a line, the Doctor won't erase. From Severance to Accord, from love to betrayal, this finale redefines who the real villains were all along. Let's break it all down. Minimal, cinematic, slow burn. By the time the war ends, there's nothing left to save. Episode 5 of The War Between the Land and the Sea delivers one of the bleakest finales in the Doctor Who universe, where humanity survives, but at an unforgivable cost. This is the ending explained, and why it's far more disturbing than it looks. If you thought The War Between the Land and the Sea was building toward a heroic last stand, if you expected the finale to give us a victory, a miracle, or even a moral win, Episode 5 makes it painfully clear. This was never that kind of story, because the end of the war doesn't ask who won. It asks something far worse. What did humanity do to survive? And once you really sit with that answer, this finale becomes quietly devastating, a shocking opening that sets the tone. Let's talk about how this episode opens, because it immediately tells you everything you need to know about the kind of finale we're in for. After Episode 4's intense cliffhanger, you'd expect tension, dread, and maybe silence. Instead, we open on something so absurd, so dark, and so uncomfortable that it almost feels like a joke until it doesn't. The Sea Devils call dogs down to the shore, and then they eat them. No dramatic score, no warning, just sudden violence played almost casually. It's grotesque. It's funny in a deeply unsettling way, and it works because it instantly reframes the power dynamic. This isn't a noble enemy. This isn't a misunderstood species begging for peace. This is a force that doesn't share human sentimentality. And when Sir Jonathan predictably objects during the diplomatic talks, Tide shuts him down with one brutally simple line. You eat our fish. And that's the moment you realize what this series has been doing all along. Because from this point forward, the show stops pretending there are clean hands on either side. Kate Lethbridge-Stewart is losing control. If the episode has a central emotional spine, it's Kate. And Kate is not coping. From the moment we see her, something is off. She's distracted, haunted, fragmented. She sees Colonel Ibrahim everywhere. At unit, at home, in moments where he physically cannot be. This isn't just grief. This is untreated trauma layered on top of responsibility that never stops. Kate doesn't get to collapse. She doesn't get to step away. And instead of processing her loss, she does what she's always done. She tightens her grip. That leads to one of the most disturbing moments in the episode. Kate blackmails her therapist into not signing her off work. On paper, it feels wildly out of bounds. But emotionally, it makes perfect sense. Because Kate Lethbridge-Stewart doesn't know who she is without command. And the idea of stepping away feels more dangerous than staying broken. And that decision quietly sets up everything that follows, including the episode's final unsettling scene. Barclay's body is telling a story before the show does. While Kate spirals internally, Barclay's body begins betraying him in ways he doesn't understand. At first, it's easy to miss. A headache here, a rash on his leg, pain in his limbs. The show never lingers too long on these details, but it doesn't need to, because they're breadcrumbs. Yes, Barklay misses Salt, of course he does. But the show is telling us something deeper is happening. Something physiological, something irreversible. And the tragedy? Barklay doesn't recognize the warning signs, because emotionally he's already crossed a line. And by the time we understand what's happening to him, it's already too late. The war was never on pause. Back at unit, the truth finally drops, and it reframes the entire season. A tactical advisor reveals that while humanity believed diplomatic talks were slowing the conflict, The Sea Devils were executing their real strategy. They weren't stalling. They were winning. Using technology beyond human understanding, they've been deliberately melting the ice caps, destabilizing the planet while humans debated language, demands, and deadlines. This is the episode's biggest reveal. Diplomacy was never about peace. It was cover. And when Tide meets Sir Jonathan again, he doesn't negotiate. He dominates. Humans are given 5 years. Meet the demands. Change your ways. Or watch the world drown. No ice caps. No climate stability. No humanity. And here's the most terrifying part. The Sea Devils aren't bluffing. Barclay's confession opens the door to disaster. Barklay visits his ex, Barbara, and their daughter, Kirby. A moment that should ground him. Instead, it unravels everything. For reasons that still feel emotionally honest but strategically baffling, Barklay confesses everything to Barbara. That he's in love with Salt. That he goes to the sea every night. That he swims alone, calling out to her. This isn't just reckless. It's catastrophic. Because Barklay doesn't realize he's already being watched. A unit officer, secretly answering to American and French generals, has been tracking his movements. Waiting. Listening. Preparing. Barklay isn't a wild card. He's bait. And the moment he confesses his love, he seals Salt's fate. Severance. The question everyone has been asking. Kate storms into number 10 with the fury of someone who knows she's being lied to. She asks the Prime Minister directly, "What is severance?" He denies everything, claims ignorance, pretends this is all a misunderstanding. But Kate sees through him instantly. And in one of her strongest scenes of the episode, she tells him the truth. He isn't built for this. He won't survive the fallout. And history will not protect him. It's a threat, and it works, because fear has always been humanity's most reliable motivator. And fear is exactly what triggers the most horrific act of the entire series. The injection that ends a spec. That night, Barklay is drugged. Hazmat teams enter his apartment while he's unconscious. No explanation, no hesitation. They inject something directly into his stomach, and then they vanish. Barklay wakes unaware, driven by instinct back to the sea. He calls out for Salt, and this time she answers. Salt tells him something vital, something terrifying. She needs Unit to request accord. There are tides within tides. Something worse is coming. And then she's gone. What neither of them realizes is that the war has already been decided. Accord arrives too late. Barklay tells Kate everything. Unit sends the coded message, Accord, hidden within diplomatic data, hoping to bypass government interference. There's a rare, tender moment when Shirley asks Kate, "What would Christopher do?" And for just a second, Kate hesitates. It's one of the few moments in the episode where hope flickers, but hope doesn't survive this world. Days pass, the sea goes silent, and then bodies begin washing ashore. Sea devils dead everywhere. The truth becomes unavoidable. Severance was biological warfare. The virus was injected into Barklay, and when he kissed Salt, he passed it on. Humanity didn't just win the war, it committed genocide. The war ends in surrender, not peace. The surviving Sea Devils summon Barklay again, not as an equal, but as a witness. Salt announces the war is over, not because of compromise, but because Homo Aqua has been destroyed. She absolves Barklay personally, but she promises the rest of humanity something chilling. Water remembers, and those responsible will be found. And killed. Flash forwards confirm it. The generals, the prime minister, all doomed. Justice doesn't come from courts. It comes from the tide,